Hey guys, so welcome to the Writer Tribe Talk Show. I'm your host, Elsa Kurt, and with me today I have author Rick Collins. Hello, and how are you?
I'm fine, Elsa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. So,
You're welcome.
um, one of my favorite things to do when I talk to a fellow author, first of all, I get like giddy excited talking to fellow authors because I love talking about everything that has to do with books.
Yep,
Um, so one of my favorite things to find out is your backstory. So can you tell me kind of like your journey of how you became a writer, when you became a writer, and
sure.
all of that?
Okay. So I got into the writing business late. I'm a retired teacher. I continue to coach track and field in Connecticut. And as I got to the point where I decided I was going to retire from teaching, I had so much juice. There were so many emotions about leaving a profession that I loved. And the year I left, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start working on my first book. I would stay after school until 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. And all of those emotions really played into, I was always a storyteller, but putting it on paper was something that I just never thought I would do. But I had the time and the emotion, and that's how I started. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. So which one was your first book that you wrote, or was it short stories or a book?
My first book was called It Emptied Us, and it was
Wow.
kind of a semi-autobiographical story about a number of high school kids coming of age around sports and some of the trials and tribulations they went through and kind of some of the things that I went through when I was in high school. But it was a raw book. It really had a lot, I would do it again, I think, but at the time, that's where my emotions were, and that's how I started.
I totally understand that. But the first novel that I wrote that was geared towards adults was kind of similar in nature. It was autobiographical,
Mhm.
set to fiction, of course. But I had a really hard time deciding to release it because it was so personal.
Yeah.
And it was so, like you said, you used the perfect word. It was raw, it was exposing, it was emotional,
Mhm.
and difficult, because it brought all of that out. And I had a lot of struggles with deciding to release it, which I ultimately did.
Yeah.
Did you have any of those struggles with releasing
Well,
something so personal?
uh, I was really excited about releasing it. It was kind of therapeutic, I think, to a certain degree, because there were some things that happened when I was in high school that were difficult, and everything was all of the storyline was changed. The characters, of course, so it kind of protected them and me, I think, at a
Sure.
certain point. But the people who bought the book and read it and responded to it, they really, most of the people from my hometown, they could see some of the things that they remember happening. So, it was some exposure of some difficult things, and but it was a story I needed to tell. And it's a story I wanted to tell for a long time. So, yeah.
But so it's such a great feeling, isn't it? It's so amazing to be able to put something out in the universe that you know is going to impact somebody else.
Yep.
Yeah, one of my first thoughts was when I decided to release the my book, I said, well, you know what, if it helps one person, if there's one person that this helps or makes them realize that they're not alone in whatever their struggle is, then I've done my job. I don't care who hates it, who doesn't agree with it,
Yep.
doesn't like it. If there's one person, and I think that's the power of books, of writing,
Yeah.
of the written
Yeah.
word, right?
It's a fun and intimidating notion that there's a book I wrote in somebody's library or on their Kindle or whatever.
Yes.
And now that I've put five together, I'm not paying my mortgage with my writing yet, but
Very
it's,
few of us are.
I know it's. I have the time. I have the
Yeah.
time at this point, so it's really been it's been a wonderful journey that continues even to this
Mhm.
day. So,
What was the reactions of your family and friends when you told them that you were going to publish a book?
um, my wife and my kids were thrilled. But my wife, knowing much of the story, was hesitant to a certain degree because she knew that, as you said before, you reveal so much about yourself, and you got to step out a little bit. And she wondered what the reaction would be from the people who would read it and kind of pick up some of the pieces of the story. All of the response was really, really good. Nice. I think that some of the people who might have been offended, I'm not sure read the book. I don't know. You know, all the characters end up coming out okay at the end, but nice. You know, a lot of stuff that they had to go through when I wrote the book. So it was, there was a little concern. Absolutely.
Sure. Now, when you first started writing that book, did you think, okay, once I get this out of my system, I'm good. I've written a book. I'm done. I can say that I did it. I purged it. You know, we use that term a lot, right? Like you purged the story. Did you know already that you were going to write another book and then, of course, another and another? Did you know at that time?
When I first started, no. But within, I would say, you know, within 6 or 7 months, I had already outlined 3 or 4 other stories. And the first book was really hard to write. My second book wrote itself. You know, you hear people talk about that and you don't think that that's possible, but this story, the second story that I wrote, the second book I wrote, it, you know, it flew out of my consciousness. And I was really surprised that it did that, or I was able to do that. But yeah, it was what a thrill to know that you have stories in you and you want to get them out. Yes. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yes, it's amazing. Talk to me about your process, your actual, because like, you know, writers we're very similar in so many ways, but I always feel like there's like 2 distinct categories. Of course, there's a gray area, but there's like 2 distinct styles of writers. There's the plotters and the pantsers, and of course there's hybrids. Sure. If you had to pick, which one would you call I heard you say outline, so I'm already guessing which one you are, but you tell me which one you are.
Well, I think that I'm probably a hybrid author. When I say I outline, I have some basic concepts that I want to address, and I'll have them outlined, but not to the point where I've seen people with boards with, you know, 3x5 cards and lines connecting, and that's not usually how I go about it. It's more like the characters reveal themselves. Yes. Who was the artist who said that? It might have been Michelangelo, but I'm probably wrong. They take a block of wood and the sculpture's already there. It's just the artist cuts away until the sculpture is revealed. I think that's probably the way I do it. I'm not quite sure exactly where it's going to go, except I know some themes I want to address. But right, yeah, that's how.
I love it. I love it. I'm always so fascinated by other people's processes because I've always said right from the get-go that I'm 100% a pantser. I sit down. I usually start with something weird like a sentence. Like I had one book that started because of a dream that I had. It was just a bizarre dream. And when I woke up, the last sentence in the dream was, "I know something you don't know." And I knew the second that I woke up that it was going to be a story. I didn't know what the story was going to be about. I didn't know anything about the story. I just knew that was the first line of the story. And I sat down and a story just, I always say it magically happened because I don't, even reading it back, and I want to ask you that, like when I read back books that I've written, I'm baffled. I'm like, I wrote that? I have almost no recollection of it. Does that happen to you or no?
No, it does. And, I'm working on another project now, but I'm also reading I have this strange technique where I've got the 5 books open and I'll read a paragraph from one book and then I go to the paragraph in a separate book and then to the next. So I'm reading 5 stories at the same time. And I was an English teacher and an English major in college. So you always had like 9 books going on anyways. So it's just, that's kind of where I'm going. And I am astonished, as you said, I wrote that, especially if I come upon something I think is good.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
when I write something and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I'd change that if I could do it over again.
Mhm.
That's always part of the process. But when you have a good line, or you have a good description of a character, some action that's happening that really comes out well, that's fun. That's a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
fun.
absolutely. Yes. And it's great that you're able to see those in your own work because we're obviously our own worst critics. So when you can actually see the nuggets of goodness in them instead of like finding every single thing wrong with them,
Right.
that's fantastic and so important. It really is because
Right.
I've told many wannabe writers or aspiring writers or authors, they always ask the same questions, how do I write a book? How do I get published? How do I do that? And our answer, and I know you can concur on this, is that you have to sit down and write, and you can't keep going back. And the big thing I always tell them is that, you can't keep going back paragraph by paragraph and rereading it and rereading it and rereading it because you're going to be stuck on that one paragraph, that first
Yeah.
paragraph, forever because you can't
Right.
get past it. Write the story, then go back to it. And people are like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. You almost have to get out of your own head as much as you're in your own head. You have to
Yeah.
get out of it, right?
Yeah. It's sometimes the emotion of the scene gets in the way of that. That's what
Mhm.
I found. Um, but you're right. When it's all laid out in terms of the first draft or whatever you're doing, and you go back and start really putting those pieces together to make sure that there's continuity in the story and there's no miracles happening, which is
Right.
something I taught
Yes.
my writers back in the day, my writing students. And yeah, it's I'm having such a great time talking to another writer because
I know it's so fun, isn't
it's
it?
there's so many things that are going through my mind right now. So I was really looking forward to talking with you today.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Like I said, I enjoy this so much. I could spend the entire day just talking about all things writing related. So this is just as much fun for me. So now when it came time for publishing, was there a debate for you? Now, I don't know if you're traditionally published or self-published. So I guess that should be my first question. Are you
Yeah.
traditionally or self-published or both?
I'm self-published.
Good for you.
It's been a frustrating journey
Mhm.
trying to get um, noticed by an agent or a publisher, and some of the stuff that I think they're looking for isn't quite what I'm writing. And
Right.
there's certain things that they're looking for at this point culturally, and unless there's a publisher out there that is looking for something different, that's where I bumped into some real problems. And you know, having an opportunity to self-publish is great in the sense that it's my story. These are my stories. It's my, I don't want to say art, but it's my craft. And if I want to change it, I'm fine with that because it's coming from me. You get an agent or a publisher, sometimes it becomes somebody else's story. And from what I understand, now at the same time, having an agent, and editors, and somebody that's marketing my story, I'm pretty sure that they know what they're doing and would probably help my stories, just make them more solid, make them something that improve them. Because I'm not great at it, I'm probably good at it. I'd like to be great at it, and I think I would need somebody to help me to that process.
Sure. Yeah, I totally understand. I've had the benefit of being both traditionally and self-published, and I will say hands down 1,000 times over, I will self-publish for eternity rather than go with a traditional publisher. And really for the
Sure.
same reasons that you actually said. I didn't realize it until I started the whole process that it turns out I'm a little bit of a control freak. And it's kind of like the same things that you're saying. I want artistic control.
Yep.
I want to do all of the things because I know that, again, there'd be nobody else to blame, right?
Right.
It's all mine. It's my credit and it's my blame, whatever the case may be. And and I say this, it was almost like a cautionary tale for traditional publishing, which is wonderful. If that's somebody's goal, I highly encourage you. If that's, what you see yourself doing, and that's the only way you want to do it, absolutely 100% keep going until you get what you want from that.
Right.
But realize that you give up a lot. Like so I have a 6-book series that's out, and the first 2 books are with a traditional publisher. And I had no control over the covers. And guess what? Hated the covers that they
Really.
picked.
Yeah.
And I was married to those covers, to that theme with the rest of the series. I was able to retain control of those, but it still had to follow their theme. So it was a big learning lesson. So, but again, obviously, self-publishing, as you well know, is quite a process. There's a lot involved. But the great news is all of the resources are available to us now. It's changed radically.
Hmm.
So I
And
love it. What?
there's a
Go ahead.
lot, the cool thing about it is if somebody has a good story to tell, it can get out there. You
Mhm.
see some garbage too,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
maybe some of my work people would say is garbage. I, would disagree, but, it's just, that's the benefit, that
Yeah,
people's voices can be heard, where a lot of
absolutely.
writers never had that opportunity
Right.
until all the changes. So I think in general, it's a fabulous opportunity for us.
I agree. I agree. And, I've said in the past that, the invent, I guess, I don't know if that's really the word I want to use, says the writer who can't use the word she wants to use. But since the invention of or creation of self-publishing platforms, you're right. You're going to get people who should be, by most standards on the bestsellers list and with the big
Mhm.
five, all of those things. And you're going to people who aren't. So self-publishing, the ability to self-publish is one of the greatest and worst things to ever happen to the
Yeah,
publishing industry, right?
I
But
agree.
I will always say that the positives of it much outweigh the negatives. And I will never be a critic. I can never be the person that sits there and criticizes or critiques another author's work, because I know what goes into it. I know how much heart goes into it. So even if somebody has not done the best job, because my early work was far from being my best work.
Mhm.
You grow, you evolve, you learn, and you just become a better writer. I think the more you write and the more you read, the better you become. But so I always encourage
Yeah,
self-publishing for sure.
and
Um,
it's.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. No,
Oh,
no. I
no, no,
just
no.
want to. I
Oh, go
just,
ahead.
I just wanted to say that in terms of, you asked about the process, and
Mhm.
and I'm fascinated by that, your story about dreams, because that's a lot of what has helped me in terms of getting started. But as a classroom teacher, and a coach, my stories aren't necessarily sports stories. There's
Mhm.
usually some sports involved in it, but that's not really where I wanted to go. It's all about, the kids that I've met and the adults I've met in my life, and as a teacher, that, some of the stories that I still want to write, about some of the turmoil that kids go through and adults go through. Um, Someone asked, "Are you a young adult writer?" And I don't think I am. I think I'm writing for adults, but sometimes the themes come out through the kids, and
Sure.
and also some very painful things that have
Mhm.
happened, that have been inspirations for stories. And I don't know if you want to get into some of the things that I've written, but I wrote. I just finished a book called The Witch of November, which is a
Mhm.
story based on, um, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which
Okay.
is a song by Gordon Lightfoot. And I was always haunted by that
Mm.
song. so I did a lot of research,
Mhm.
and uh, came up with that. And interestingly enough, finally figured out that if I'm going to sell a book, you got to
Mhm.
find the audience that wants to read that. So
Right.
if on Facebook, I'm on a bunch of different uh, nautical writing
Mhm.
societies, and a lot of Great Lakes shipping stuff.
Okay.
And it's sold. It sold
Mm,
way more than I thought it was going to sell, because
that's
the
awesome.
story was something that connected to the people. So the people that I was writing it for.
Mhm.
So that was great. The book I wrote just prior to that, a book called Lovely Rita,
Mhm.
um, had to do with two students I had in elementary school.
Mhm.
And this is true. Um, Although I changed the story around, Lovely Rita was about, there's one boy, his name was Jeff,
Mhm.
a student of mine who died when he was 11.
Oh.
He had a terrible heart defect. He should
Mhm.
not have lived as long as he did. And he was such a courageous kid. And I always wanted to write a story about him. The other student I had, this girl named Rita,
Mhm.
uh, was a student who, those red flags go up when you
Sure.
think about certain kids.
Mhm.
And to make a long story short, she was sold by her
Mm.
family in Pakistan
Wow.
to a second cousin here in Connecticut.
Mm.
And when we realized there was something terrible, she was sold away again.
Wow.
We never found out what happened to her. So what I did was I took those two kids, I turned them into high school kids. Jeff's he's dying, but he meets Rita, who is a domestic slave. She confides in him eventually, that she's about to be sold away, and he kidnaps her to get her away from. Because if you're, from what the research I've done, when if you're a kid who gets sold a second time, it's usually down the ladder to a much darker place. She
Mhm.
was a domestic slave. Who knows what she was going to become? Anyways, he kidnaps her, gets her to Canada, but he's
Mhm.
chased by this bounty hunter who's hired by this family that owns this girl, and all all along the fact that Jeff is dying. So I had a lot of, I had, it was a hard book to write, because during the entire process, I was thinking about these two kids who I cared about quite a bit, and they're gone. They're not in
Right.
my life anymore. She's gone. I don't know what happened to her. And
Mm.
obviously he passed away. So a lot of what I write about comes from that emotional well of, dealing with uh, the heartbreak of, of teaching. There's so many great things about
Sure.
teaching, but the heartbreak of it. Now, just researching you a little bit,
Mhm.
I understand that you have very strong um, support for police.
I
Is this
do.
true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, my third book the theme of it is this female police chief
Mhm.
uncovers clues that there's this monster in town, this
Mm.
coach who's been abusing kids for years.
Wow. Okay.
And it's all been kept quiet. She finds out that her husband has known about it all along.
Mm.
So in order to, but the coach is still coaching, he's
Mhm.
targeting another kid. Pretty
Wow.
heavy theme.
Yeah, definitely.
So what does she do? Because she's in law enforcement.
Mhm.
She's put in this terrible position. If
Right.
she arrests this guy, the fact that her husband has known about this guy for decades and said
Mhm.
nothing, she'll destroy her husband. But she
Right.
can't let this go on. So
Right.
she put in this position where she has to do the unthinkable,
Mhm.
and she ends up killing the guy
Wow.
and covers it up. So the reason I can write about this is we had a guy like that in our town.
Wow. Mm.
We had a guy like that in town. So and I guess it comes back to we talk about, we write what we know about.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So this was something that was seared in my soul, and
Mm.
it was a really hard book to write
Yeah,
because I knew kids who were hurt by this guy.
right.
So,
I
so
love
that's
that you I love that you use your writing, because I think we all do to all different degrees, I'm sure. But I think for all of us, there is that degree of catharsis that, you're just purging these things that need to come out. And even though, I love the way, especially Lovely Rita, was that the name of it?
yep, lovely
I
reading.
love the way that the experience, the real story, kind of morphed into this other story, but still held true to that. I mean, that's a gift in itself to be able to do that,
Yeah.
to make those kind of adaptations. I
Yep.
was going to say adaptments. It's not even a word. Adaptations. Uh, I'm making you doubt that I'm a writer, aren't I?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I like to make up words too as I go. So,
What was it? Adaptions? What did you say?
yeah, I know. I think the right word, I think I was going to say adaptments. And as soon as I said it in my head, I'm like, that's not a word.
It'll
Maybe
end
it
up in a
is.
dictionary.
I
It'll end
know,
up in a
right?
dictionary someday.
Yeah. Yeah. I want credit for it though, or
Yeah.
blame, maybe blame. Um, so you have 5 books out, is that right?
Yep.
And you're working on number 6, is that correct?
Yeah. So the sixth one is um, again going back to something that happened when I was a kid. Um, those radio towers that
Mhm.
you see springing up all over the place.
Oh yeah.
We were in high school. We climbed one, and a
Mm,
kid got up there and he was petrified. He couldn't get down, so we had to get down, but get him down, which was extraordinarily dangerous. So just taking that one event, I want to turn it into a story where the kid doesn't make it, like he ends up falling to his death, and it turns out that some of the people on the tower with him um, were looking for an opportunity to kill this kid.
wow. Oh, this is going to
And
be good.
well, we'll see. Again,
Yeah.
talk about being pantsy. I have the idea about where I want to go with it, but
Yep.
how it unfolds, I'm
Mhm.
not quite sure yet. I just know the basic parameters around the fact that, um, a lot of times there are tragedies and horrors that happen to young people or adults, and it takes some kind of trauma to bring it out.
Mhm.
So when I was talking about the book about the police officer and the unimaginable things she has to deal with,
Mhm.
um, you know, it was, I don't know, it was important to write about that. It'll be
Right.
important to write for me to write this next
Mhm.
story, but uh, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a side note, as part of the law enforcement family, I don't know if you know, I'm a law enforcement spouse.
Yep,
I love that you address the moral struggles and dilemmas that they face, because
yeah,
it's not unrealistic. I mean, these are things that happen, unfortunately, all the time, and they are put in these moral quandaries and legal quandaries, of course, and the choices that they make obviously have long-lasting impacts and affect, not only them, of course, but everyone around them. So I already love the way that you addressed that and that you wove that into the story. So that's
yeah.
really cool.
And just to come back to that story a little bit, I needed to write it as it's a story about how this family is dealing with this terrible trauma.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not in a family of law enforcement,
Mhm.
so I really needed to stay away from the details of being a police officer or a
Sure.
police chief because I don't really know that, but I do know what any person would have to deal with if they
Hmm.
knew that this horror was happening in their midst, and what do you do to stop it?
Right.
So, you know, coming back to what you're talking about in terms of being a spouse of a police officer,
Mhm.
um, the only thing I can the only thing I can draw on is what you just said.
Mm.
sometimes these moral quandaries that they have to navigate,
Mhm.
sometimes over a period of time,
Sure.
I gather, and sometimes in a split-second situation.
Mm.
And I understand that's the case. I
Right.
just I stayed away from the details
Mhm.
of this police chief's job because
Mhm.
I'm not worthy to tell it. Since I'm not in
I,
it, I'm not
right.
worthy to tell it. I can tell it as a human being who's in
Sure.
authority.
Yep.
I can tell that story.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally get that. I've had to do it in stories as well, where I've had characters whose backstory or lifestyle is not something, they're not like if they're not like the main character, I don't know how deep I'd go into certain aspects. It's all a matter of
yeah,
like what's relevant to the story, right? I think that's how you have to gauge it. But
yeah,
yeah, no, I totally get that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And it was
Yeah.
hard because it was true to a certain degree.
Right. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes it even more difficult. So, yeah, no, I love that you hit the hard topics like that, because most people shy away from them. So, and even writers who, their whole purpose is, and that ends up being their writer's block, that they can't access the depth of it because the trauma of whatever the topic
right.
is more than what they're ready to release, and the reader can see that. So when you're able
Yeah,
to actually access it and put it out there and show them, the rule, don't show, don't tell.
yeah,
We have it
yeah.
ingrained in our head. I feel like there's a I feel like that should be a tattoo on my wrist or on my back of my hand when I'm going to write, that it'll say, oh, show, don't tell. Okay, okay, okay. Oh,
That's hard
so
to do. That's hard to do sometimes, though.
it's really hard. Yeah, it takes, oh
It's
my
always
God.
hard.
I don't
Yeah,
know about you, but I go through so many rounds of edits, and even still, when it goes to my beta readers, they're like, well, right here, you probably could. I'm like, really? But that's okay. That's what they're there for. That's why
that's
we
right.
need them to do that for us.
That's
Um,
that's the next step I want to take is to get a storehouse of more beta readers
oh yeah, they're
to
such
help
a
me through that
such a
process.
great wealth of usefulness, help, everything. They're great.
Yeah.
So Rick, tell us where we can find all of your books, where we can find you, if you're going to be doing any book speaking anywhere. Give us like the whole list of where we can find you.
Well, um, my book's on Amazon.
Okay.
All five books are there. So that's the one place you can find them at this point.
Hmm.
Um, the pandemic has really been just awful in terms of where I was as a writer because I was speaking at a number of libraries and schools in Connecticut. And once the pandemic hit, all of that stuff kind of dried up. So um, that was a real disappointment. But right now, I'm focusing on trying to establish more connections with schools because, especially Lovely Rita, because that's such I don't know, it's a tragedy and a romance at the same time. I'm trying to sell that
Hmm.
um, in that respect. I have my own page on Facebook. It's the Rick Collins page, and I try to put as much on that as I can. And then people just follow me on Facebook and the different groups that I'm in. So that's I'm still. It's only been 2.5 years since I
Hmm.
started. I got
Wow.
five books out.
Good for
It's
you.
like
That's
I'm
fantastic.
I'm astounded that I've done it. And
That's
so
good work ethic right there.
well, I've had time. I've had time and motivation. So, being a
Nice.
retired teacher, talk about getting out at the right time with the pandemic and everything.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh, you aren't kidding. I'm so happy for you.
yeah, so am I. I
What a
didn't.
what a stressful experience that's been for all of our teachers. Oh my goodness. So
Yeah,
I'm
very
really
hard.
glad for you.
Thank
And
you.
I'm glad for all of us that we get these great books from you now that you've had this time to do this. So this is really, really exciting. And I'll make sure when we put this up on YouTube and the podcast, we'll make sure we put links to get your books and all that good stuff.
That'd be
Um,
great.
Rick, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I just want to keep going, to be honest with you. We could go on, like, if it was up to me, I would force you to sit there all day and we would just keep talking about books, but I know that you have a life and I won't do that to you. So I
I
thank you
appreciate
tremendously.
I appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you about what I'm doing, and I wish you
Awesome.
luck too, because you're still writing, obviously, and
Still writing, yeah, among 50 million other things, but that's
and
good. What do
from
they
what
say? If
I
you want something done, ask a busy person. I think they say.
yeah, and you're the vice president now of Kappa.
I am the new vice president of Kappa, and I'm so incredibly excited about this. We're going to continue the great legacy of Kappa, and we're going to be bringing some new and exciting stuff to the organization. And we hope you stick with us and encourage any fellow author or writer friends. They don't have to be published. They're just writers, and they want to get involved and be part of something really, really great and special. We invite all Connecticut writers, publishers, authors, the whole works. So yes,
I will definitely spread the word.
awesome. I appreciate it so much. And I would love to, when you publish the next one, I'd love to have you come back on again if you feel like it.
That'd be great. I love that.
Awesome.
I'd love that. Yeah, please.
Outstanding. All right. I thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, Elsa. You too.
Thank you.